Yo, what's up? It's someone that's someone, and welcome back to another story mix. Today, I wanted to showcase some different prescription stimulants. Most commonly, people know about Adderall, but there's a whole world of prescription stimulants to explore. All with different strengths, durations, dosages, and sometimes even different purposes. We'll be showing some common ones like Adderall and Vyvanse, and then some not so common ones like Wellbutrin and Focalin. And I do have to say some of these reports are combinations with like Diphenhydramine and some other things, but the stimulating effects of the prescriptions still played a strong role. These are some really defining experiences that both showed the medicinal and recreational usage of it, also some of the dangers. But let me know what I should cover next, and like the video if you enjoy. So without further ado, let's dive right into this. Overdose at school. Okay, first off I should say I have a prescription for Adderall, but I never took it until this day. I woke up about 6:30 a.m., groggy and tired as usual, and got ready for school. Out of the blue, I decided it would be a good idea to try my prescription. It had been prescribed 2 years prior, since I had been struggling concentrating at school. I found the pill box empty, and remembered that I had refused to take them before, and flushed them down the toilet. It had expired a couple months back anyway. My little brother also had a prescription for Adderall though, so I decided I would just take his. He actually used his. I read the label, and it said take 2 in the morning, so I figured I'd take twice that, since I weighed almost exactly twice as much as them. I took them about 6:45 a.m., and about 10 minutes later, my mouth was extremely dry, I felt out of breath, and I got the chills. I wasn't bothered by this at all, but suddenly a friend of mine, M, had wanted me to give her some pills so she could focus at school too. I put 20 in a Ziploc bag and got a ride from my carpool to school shortly after. I met up with M at about 7:30 and gave her the pills, and I went to first period where I sat next to her. My first period was a joke, so we just talked instead of actually listening. During our conversation, she brought out that you can get high if you take more than you're supposed to. She ended up giving me 10 of the pills and keeping 10 for herself. Midway through first period, at about 8:30, we both went to the bathroom and popped 10 pills each. The original symptoms I had earlier came back with one additional effect. My hands started shaking slightly, like you do when you get the shivers. I thought nothing of it though, and continued on with school. By 10:30, lunch had started, and eating was the last thing I wanted to do. I felt too weak to walk around, so I lay down by my next class, waiting and breathing heavily. An hour later, I was in third period, and I started to get uncontrollable tremors. As I was sitting down, my legs would shake violently. My Japanese teacher asked if I was sick and told me I could try to sleep in the back of the room until I felt better. 90 minutes passed, and I was still shaking uncontrollably. My hands turned blue, and I could not move or even feel them. At this point I was a little worried, just because everyone around me was so concerned and seemed so freaked out by my condition. I slowly walked to the next class, letting everyone feel my hands on the way. They were very cold, and I still couldn't move them. At the beginning of fourth period, we have a block schedule, so that was my last class. Some of my friends convinced me to talk to the teacher because my arm was blue up to my elbow and I could still not move my hands. The feeling was like I forgot how to move them. It felt exactly like when I had a heat stroke a couple years earlier and I forgot how to use my whole body from the neck down. Learning how to walk again was a bitch, but thanks to intense physical therapy, I was back to normal within a few months when the doctors had told me I would never be able to walk again. Anyways, back to my story. I went to the nurse's office where she took my pulse and temperature. My heart was racing and my temperature was a little above normal, but I felt freezing. They asked me if I had taken any medicine, and I told them I had taken Adderall for the first time, but I had a prescription and that I thought I was just having an allergic reaction to it. They called my aunt, who picked me up around 2:30 p.m. At this point, I was still having tremors, my arms were still blue, stomach still hurt, and my legs still could barely hold up my weight. My aunt drove me home first, so I could show my doctor exactly what I took. Oh shit. I knew it was illegal to take someone else's prescription, so once I got home, I said I couldn't find it. She bought it, and we left to go to the hospital. During the time I was in the car, I threw up about 10 times. This was the worst I ever felt in my life. Once I got to the hospital, the doctor ran all the normal tests and pumped my stomach. I told my doctor I had taken 4 pills, and the reason I said that amount because I knew there was no way explaining taking 14 when it says take 2. He then looked at me with surprise and that the most he'd ever prescribed someone was 2 pills a day. By far the scariest part of the whole experience is when I had to give a UA and my goods had shrunk to extremely small size. I was so worried it would never return back to normal, yet too embarrassed to ask my doctor if it would. I had to wait for all the results of the test to come back before they let me leave. By the time I left, all the symptoms besides the dry mouth and stomach ache had pretty much disappeared. Later that night I called Em to find out she had also thrown up many times as well, but didn't have as bad of a reaction as me. I asked my doctor later about this, and he said it was probably something to do with body fat. I'm an athlete, and my body fat is only 5%. Both me and Em did not eat or sleep for 4 days. She lost 15 pounds, and I lost 10 in that same time.
I had fun studying while on it. Vyvanse, an Adderall alternative. I have tried most things out there for ADHD, being a college student, and have a prescription for Vyvanse now. I personally think that it's one of the best to aid in any attempt to make my concentration increase. I have had Adderall, who hasn't if you have ADHD or are in college studying for final exams? And personally, I did not like the sense of being frantic while learning. Yes, it does the job it's supposed to do and keeps me on track. I had been prescribed Ritalin and Concerta as well, but I personally didn't like the way it made me feel when trying to read. When trying to read on Ritalin, I felt an overwhelming dizziness, and personally, I thought it got in the way of my learning instead of facilitating it. A friend of mine was prescribed Vyvanse earlier in the year, and I figured I would give it a shot. All I can personally say is, wow, this is one drug that allowed me to not only concentrate, but also conquer time, or so I thought. My view on it, as I am prescribed it now, is that it allows me to make learning fun as it can be. Studying or functioning on this makes for an enjoyable experience that's very hard to describe. The only way I can put it is that I had fun studying while on it. Vyvanse made it fun to learn about all the things that I was dreading putting myself through. Please don't get me wrong when I say it is fun, because it's not a trip. I can still function normally and do everything that I need to do, but it gives me an extra oomph in everything that I do. For example, in the working environment, it provides a few benefits. It provides the awareness and fully awakeness, that isn't a word I know, during the day and allows me to get my work done. I stay on task and do not need a break from what I am doing or wander off task. It makes doing the meaningless work that I am required to get done less work and more play, I guess. I can almost compare it to when I get a new video game that I've been waiting to play for quite some time and sit down to play it for a while. That feeling is the same feeling that I get when I am doing an English paper or trying to get through my entire economics textbook a few days before the final, but I will get to that later. When I'm looking forward to doing something academic, Vyvanse makes me want to do it, something that I have not found with Adderall or Concerta. The experience that I get when I am on it is almost like Adderall in the way that it makes me work faster and allows me to pay close attention to detail. There are not the same drawbacks, however, of getting the racing heart or the agitation. At school, I work at a phone bank where we call alumni for donations and such, and one thing I found very useful is the fact that it makes me very friendly and outgoing. My friend said that he did not experience this, but he also isn't that kind of person. I'm a pretty friendly and outgoing person, but I think that this just enhanced it more than what I would normally be. It makes the time go by very quickly, and the 3-hour shifts that I work of just calling people from a computer go by very quickly. Time seems to fly while on Vyvanse, but not in a bad way. I pick my head up to stretch or something, and I will notice that an hour or two has gone by, but I quickly realize how much work I have gotten done over the amount of time that I have been working. This is where I get the idea that I can conquer time, because the work I don't want to do doesn't seem like a chore anymore. In the recreational department, It allows for some good sessions of video games, reading, working out, and even cleaning. The only drawback I can see when taking Vyvanse is that it overwhelms me with the feeling that I should be getting something done. However, that is easily trumped by anything shy of staring at the wall. Like I said earlier, even cleaning my room gives me a sense of accomplishment that's comparable to sitting down with a new video game for the first time. Certain things that I enjoy while doing on Vyvanse would have to be work, obviously, studying, reading, cleaning, working out, and generally being productive. Without a doubt, one of my favorite things is coloring. I cannot quite put my finger on why, but I think it has something to do with paying attention to the detail of getting everything in lines, coupled with the feeling of watching something come together, as well as the huge sense of accomplishment once it's done. All in all, I have to say from personal experience that this is a much better alternative to Adderall, because it takes care of the one thing Adderall does not, which is the craving to learn. I get a more profound satisfaction from the work that I do, and it does not turn me into a zombie. I take 50 milligrams daily. It's time-released and has to be ingested for the medication to take effect. If taken regularly in the capsule, it will last for roughly 10 hours. The 50 milligram dosage is equivalent to a 72 milligram dosage of Ritalin or Concerta. Vyvanse is offered in as little as a 10 milligram dose all the way up to 70 milligrams.
Reckless and lucky. Before I get into what happened, I just want to say I know this was stupid, and I'm surprised I lived through this, but I just didn't care at the time of the trip. I'm an ex-poly addict at this point, and have a lot of prior substance abuse experience. I had a couple of sole opioid overdoses, and a few overdoses with mixed substances. At the time of the trip, I had a prescription for the Focalin. I worked overnight at a supermarket. I had bought DPH as generic sleep aids and DXM in the form of Vyvanse Delsum the day before after getting off of work. It was about 8 a.m. when I drank a whole bottle of Delsum, which I figured out to come out to about 850 milligrams. I took around 600 to 700 milligrams of Benadryl and enjoyed my trip before going to sleep. It was just a normal DPH/DXM trip. Music was amazing. Saw some bugs on the wall. Heard voices. I woke up at around 6 p.m. and I had to go to work at 11 p.m. that night. I normally would never do this, but I think I was super dissociated and just said fuck it and downed another bottle of Delsum. Everything felt really zoomed out, and I tried my hardest to walk normally so people wouldn't suspect that I'm on something. Music was really good, and I couldn't really feel my body at all. Like I was numb without the euphoria on a high dose of opiates. I was just chilling at my PC, listening to music and watching YouTube while tripping for a couple hours until it came time for work. I crushed out 2 10 milligram Focalin in between some spoons and snorted it before I got in the shower. Everything was really zoomed out in the shower, but I had so much energy. It felt like my body was surging with electricity kind of, and I just wanted to move and jump around, but everything was still numb feeling, so I had a hard time doing this. My mood changed too, and I felt the happiest I'd ever been. Very talkative and sociable, which is the complete opposite of how I am normally. Before I left my house, I took a 10 milligram Focalin orally and 500 milligrams of DPH. This is probably one of, if not the dumbest thing I've ever done, because I was still learning how to drive, and I drove my mom's car to work with her in the passenger seat. I was really dissociated, but I tried very hard to keep my cool. I didn't really have many visual hallucinations, but I did have a lot of auditory ones. I kept hearing my girlfriend's voice, my mom's voice, my grandpa's voice, random music. Sometimes my ears would ring. I even heard the gun sounds from CSGO and Rust occasionally. It was very hard to focus on the road. I kept on speeding up way past the speed limit and running stop signs. And I remember my mom bitching at me, but I just didn't care because I was so out of it. Eventually I got to work. It was very hard to walk, but I think I managed to look sober because I didn't get any weird looks or anything. Eventually I got the things I needed to stock on a U-boat and proceeded to the aisle. I had earbuds in and music sounded fucking amazing, but I kept hearing people's voices, so I got distracted. But I eventually learned to ignore them. The floors and walls would move, but I would try not to stare for too long because I thought I'd get in trouble for not doing anything. I had to match the numbers on the product to the numbers on the shelf, and it was very hard to read them. I had to squint and stare at it for a good minute. Eventually my boss called for a break, and I went into the bathroom and popped 2 10-more-milligram Focalin. Over the course of the next 30 minutes, my mood skyrocketed back to the feeling I had before. I was really happy, and I had a lot of energy, but my body was numb and everything felt distant. I kept repeating things to myself in my head, and they weren't thought loops. It was like I had a lot of energy, and I just liked to say it. I remember one of the things I kept telling myself was, ride a U-boat like a skateboard, and I have no idea why. Eventually, I got all my work done in an aisle, and I moved on to the next one. I felt like Superman, and I can stack and organize the aisle super quickly. I was hallucinating noises from different games and repeating random shit in my head. Eventually I got off of work and was able to clock out. My grandpa picked me up, but I didn't drive home because I told him I didn't feel good. Shortly after I got to my house, I felt the crash from the Focalin. It didn't really impact my mood at all. I just felt normal again, and my energy dipped very low, and I fell asleep while I was watching a movie. I was still very dissociated like before. Everything was zoomed out, and the hallucinations were majority auditory instead of visual. Next day I went to work, I snorted 10 milligrams of Focalin and took 10 milligrams orally, and I got the worst chest pain of my life and felt like my heart was going to explode after an hour and 30 minutes of stocking stuff. I don't know if it was because I took Dextromethorphan DPH the day before or because I had taken too much Focalin in a short amount of time. But I don't think that's the case because I've taken more Focalin at once before and didn't have any chest pain.
Grand mal seizure. Not fun. This incident took place last Thursday night. It was one of those events that removes the divide between your secretive hidden life from the life you portray to others, like two worlds colliding in an instant. And after it's over, you better hope you have a good character to fall back on after you lose your blanket of lies. Anyways, this was one of those. It sucks ass, by the way. I have recently obtained a prescription for Wellbutrin SR 100mg tabs for a major depressive disorder that I've struggled with for who cares how long. I've discontinued Prozac for no good reason. It worked fine, but I heard Bupropion could give you a buzz, being on a dopamine and norepinephrine, is that right, reuptake inhibitor. These are pleasure transmitters. Yay. I take Adderall XR in addition for ADD, but mainly because it can fuck you up. But that's a different story. This is what happened. On Thursday morning, we had a snow day. When I have nothing to do, I get into trouble. It's just how I am. I spent the morning at my neighbor's, snorting cocaine and feeling cool. That night I was in my room and had no high whatsoever. And so reality had sunk in, and due to my major lack of coping skills, I had to get high again. Any kind of high. All I had was Wellbutrin. I popped 5 or 6 100mg tabs and waited for about half an hour, and felt nothing. I went to eat dinner with my mom, and soon enough, I started to feel pretty good, and told my mom, I feel pretty damn good. And then, everything goes black. I awake roughly 10 minutes later, in the kitchen sitting in a chair. Someone has their hand in my shirt, and I assume it's a weird dream. It becomes apparent there are 2 EMTs crouched next to me, putting electro things on my chest, and about 7 firefighters surrounding them. I don't know what to think. I was very, very frightened and very, very disoriented. I remember yelling, "What's going on?" incoherently, and my mom telling me I had a seizure and explaining to the paramedics what had happened. It was very bizarre and strangely horrifying. It was the lapse in time that I found particularly disturbing. I was escorted to the ambulance and was hysterical at the idea of being taken away. The ambulance seems to scare me more than being put in a police car. But yeah, I was freaking out. I was hooked up to the monitor and all that, and away we went, en route to Legacy Emmanuel Hospital. My heart rate was roughly 180 beats per minute, pretty damn high. The paramedic put an IV in, which hurt like a bitch. I was asked all sorts of questions about my meds. I explained that I abused all of them, yada yada. It was no fun. At the hospital, I was wheeled in on the bed, and felt like a lazy bum and insisted on walking, but they weren't having it. I got my own room and spent some very strange silent moments with my mom and little brother. Finally calm enough to ask what the hell just happened, I explained my long-hidden Adderall addiction to some relief, with my mom being cool about it. They took some blood, gave me a CAT scan, and some funny looks, but no lollipop, which really pissed me off. The blood showed traces of cocaine. Busted. Now all my meds are regulated, and my relationship with my parents is very strained, but getting better. I was unconscious during the seizure, but being told what it was like was heartbreaking coming from my little brother. He wrote me a long letter begging me to get off drugs because he loves me, and it just tore my fucking heart out. It's been a miserable week. Bupropion should not be fucked with. Of course, neither should any pharmaceuticals. Grand mal seizures are very, very scary. It is now a haunting experience and a valuable lesson. Peace. Euphoric productive motivation. It was final exam week at university, so I decided to visit my old friend Vyvanse again and picked up 2 20-milligram pills. Vyvanse is not typically my recreational drug of choice, thus my tolerance is low. But when things simply must be accomplished and my workload feels overwhelming, there's nothing like the sustained wave of focus, motivation, and productivity provided by this drug. The euphoria and off-the-charts confidence boost is nice too. I take no herbal supplements or other medication. 8:15 a.m. Woke up, took the first pill, 20 milligrams, on an empty stomach, and washed it down with a bottle of water. I'm feeling groggy from just waking up, but my outlook is positive and my demeanor is pleasant as I begin looking forward to the effects of the drug. I stashed the second pill in my pocket, knowing I'll want a boost later on in the day. 8:45 a.m. Beginning to feel the first effects. Vision is sharper, colors just a bit brighter. I am no longer groggy. I notice that I am in a very good mood, seemingly for no reason. I started working on an assignment that's due in an hour, and I find the task both engaging and fulfilling. I wish I could write like this all the time. 9:45 a.m. As I finish the paper I was writing, I realize that I'm fully feeling the effects of the Vyvanse. I'm not overly excitable or speeding excessively, but I notice a definite pulsation of slightly euphoric energy. Vision is noticeably sharper, and I feel on top of the world, like it had been a really good day, even though all I had done was wake up and do homework. 10:30 a.m. I go to work for my shift at a local restaurant, where I realize we are short-staffed and quickly becoming quite busy. I handle the crowd with ease, smiling all the time while I was preparing the seemingly endless pile of orders. I'm on top of the world, and my energy seems boundless. 11 a.m. I decide to take the second 20 milligram pill. Stomach is still empty at this point, but I have no appetite. I wash the pill down with another half bottle of water. Vyvanse tends to make my mouth dry and make me quite thirsty. 11:30 a.m. I look up at the clock and notice that it has been about 30 minutes since I took the last pill. Time is flying by. I also realize that I'm feeling the strongest euphoria, motivation, and energy thus far. The second pill has kicked in. 1:30 p.m. I finish my shift at work and start walking to class. I notice that I'm smoking vastly more cigarettes than usual today. I smoked 3 or 4 on my walk across campus instead of my usual one. 2:30 p.m. I am in class and begin to notice a very slight drop in the euphoria that had accompanied me all day. I'm still energetic, but perhaps a little less so than before. I'm drinking lots of water, still have no appetite, and am desperately craving a cigarette. 4:45 p.m. I'm in my last class of the day, and am beginning to notice a definitive decline in the drug's effects as they begin to wear off. Even though I've started to come down from the effects that I desired, I'm also well aware that the drugs would continue to affect me for hours to come. I'm beginning to develop an appetite, and I'm still smoking lots of cigarettes. 6 p.m. I decide to cook some dinner as my appetite has come back with a vengeance. My thoughts are still a bit racy, but my body's beginning to grow tired. Even though I want to sit down and relax, I find it difficult to stay seated for very long. The Vyvanse is still giving me the urge to fidget and move, even though I'm not so sure I want to anymore. 9 p.m. Resting is easier now, especially if I keep my mind occupied. I'm watching TV intently and feel the first trembles of actual sleepiness come creeping in. 11 p.m. I'm definitely tired now and take a very refreshing shower. My thoughts are no longer racing, and I'm feeling generally at peace. However, I'm a bit frustrated because although I feel the urge to sleep, my body just won't let me yet. I put on some music and start reading a book, hoping sleep will come soon. 12:30 p.m. I fall asleep after taking 3 milligrams of melatonin sleep aid and slept soundly through the night. Next morning, no noticeable hangover, everything is back to normal. All in all, it was another pleasant day of happiness, talkative, productive energy, and motivation provided by Vyvanse. A night full of seizures I can't remember. Some backstory before the actual trip report. I'm a male, 20 years old, 6'4", and 250 pounds. I had no tolerance to DPH at the time, and I took it on an empty stomach. Yes, I know Stims plus DPH is very, very dangerous, and I was aware of it at the time. This was roughly 2 months after my 7th month severe addiction to DPH had ended. I had only used it one other time in those 2 months. I considered myself experienced with the substance. I once had a month-long binge on it, where I did 600 milligrams every 18 hours. During this binge, I had combined it with some wild shit and had a few big trips at 1.2 grams. Anyway, on this particular day, I took a 300 milligram Wellbutrin XR and 2 20 milligram Vyvanse XR at the start of the day. I don't remember the exact times because I just don't keep track of time in general, but it was probably around noon or 1 p.m. Around 8 p.m., I crushed up a Wellbutrin and snorted all of it. I then broke open 4 capsules of Vyvanse and snorted 3 of them. About 10 minutes later, I took 500 milligrams of Benadryl. I didn't feel any effects from the Benadryl besides the dry mouth, confusion, and music enhancement. An hour after I took it, I started to feel the body load and everything else. I was having small hallucinations in my peripheral vision. Small things moving, static, streaks, red dots appearing for a second and then disappearing. I never hallucinated any colors other than black and white on this low of a dose of Benadryl, so it was interesting to me. I crushed up another Wellbutrin and snorted about a third of it. The body load from the Benadryl lifted instantly. That was the only difference I noticed with this. I also felt more alert mentally, but my eyes were still hard to keep open. I snorted the last capsule of Vyvanse about 15 minutes later and could then focus on stuff pretty clearly. My memory was a little better, and it was much easier to type on the keyboard. I didn't have such a short attention span anymore. I'm not sure what part of the trip this was, because I don't remember a lot, but I remember I then snorted the last of the Wellbutrin. I remember my eyes being hard to keep open, but there was no body load, and I still had all the mental effects of the Benadryl. A couple minutes passed before an extreme sense of paranoia came over me. I thought people were watching me, hiding in the dark or waiting for me to walk by. I saw shadow people through the corners of my eyes, hiding in the darkness. But when I would go to focus on them, they would disappear. I knew they were watching me, though. I spent about, I'd say, 30 minutes, maybe even an hour, just walking from my computer in the living room to my bedroom. I stood there frozen most of the time, just staring into the darkness, paranoid something was there. I always do my DPH trips at night with all of the lights off except my monitor. Even without the effects of DPH, I'm still and always have been super paranoid in general. When I felt terrified of something on a trip, I'd use my phone flashlight to see that nothing was there. This night, my phone was on a low battery. and the flashlight doesn't work if it's too low. My only phone charger was in my room, so I couldn't use my computer to charge it. I walked around very, very slowly, checking every corner in my house, because I was super paranoid something was there. The auditory hallucinations were what really convinced me there were people there. I heard footsteps, breathing, scraping, and shuffling every once in a while. I remember getting to my hallway that has dark rooms on each side with the doors open, and I ran past them because I was scared something was going to jump out at me. This trip was the most paranoid and terrified I had ever felt in my entire life. Every time I took a step, I felt like someone or something was going to get me, and I was going to die. I was panicking the whole time, and all I could think to do was just stand there, hoping these people didn't notice me. Eventually, I got to my kitchen and took 30 milligrams of Buspirone because I thought it would help. It didn't, and all it did was make my eyes feel heavier. Then, I remember getting to my bed, sitting down with the light on, and after that, I have absolutely no clue what happened. I think I had sat down on my bed between 1 and 3 a.m. Next thing I know, I woke up the next day around 4:30 p.m. Last thing I remember from the trip was that my door was closed, the light was on, the window was open, and I'm 90% sure I spent some of that time I didn't remember seizing on the ground / in my bed. When I woke up, the window was closed, the door was open, lights were off, and a couple of my hoodies were thrown around my room. My PS4 controller was under my bed for some reason. My bathroom was a mess too. There were pill containers on the ground and in the sink. They were all closed, so I assume I couldn't get them open. I also had a splitting headache, and no amount of aspirin or ibuprofen would help me. My chest truly felt like it was going to explode. To be honest, as weird as it sounds, I'm glad I tried this combo. I'm sure people have done stims and DPH before, but I've only seen a few trip reports with them. Anyone who wants to try this combination, I wouldn't recommend it, unless you want to be a paranoid, tweaked out mess. Not to mention the extremely high risk for a seizure and or a heart attack. It's 10 times more terrifying than a straight DPH trip, and definitely not worth the risk.